Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Whoever's joining us, we're just going to give it a couple more minutes just to have other people join us, and then we'll start our session. So just be patient, and we'll start in a couple of minutes if that's all right. Okay, so we'll start our session. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us to our opportunities for BMA youth in the British Army. Firstly, I'd like to introduce and tell you a little bit about BPF. I'm Faryal Khan, and I'll be your host this evening. BPF, they aim to engage, unite, and empower UK's Pakistani and BMA community by creating networks and implementing real change. Their vision is to become a single platform for the community, and they believe that events like this will help them achieve their goal. They have recently opened their first community hub in Rochdale at the Castlemere Community Centre in partnership with Global Livelihoods. The community hub will provide locals with a walk-in surgery for guidance and advice, and networking events for men, women, youth advisory sessions, or even a space to come and work and have meetings over a cup of tea. If you're interested and you want to support them, you can head over to their website, which is www.britishpakistanfoundation.com, and sign up for their membership. It's only £10 for the year. Nothing is this cheap, and they will give you loads of benefits. And it's £10 per annum, and they provide you with much needed support. And if you want to follow them on social media, the links will be there, and they'll be put on the website. And they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, and they are on LinkedIn. Like I said, we are here talking about opportunities for the BME youth in the British Army. We have two incredible Army people here. We have Lieutenant Colonel Guy Bartle-Jones and Major Naveed Mohammed. We'd like you to meet them both. We're very lucky to have them. Lieutenant Colonel Guy Bartle-Jones and Major Mohammed Naveed Mohammed, welcome this evening. Thank you so much for coming. Colonel Guy, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself a little to our audience and just tell us a little about yourself and your experience with the British Army, please.
Thank you, Faryal. It's a very great pleasure to be invited by the British Pakistan Foundation to speak on behalf of the British Army. I'm actually a retired officer now, have been for 6-7 years, but I joined the Army in 1987. Commissioned into the Welsh Guards, an infantry battalion in 1989, with the sole intention of serving my short service commission of 3 years and ending up serving 26 years because I enjoyed it so much. One thing that I did get to see through the Army was to travel widely across the globe, and most notably to have served and lived for a number of years in Pakistan in two stints. The first in 2001 at the Command and Staff College in Quetta, and then in 2013 and 14 in Islamabad, working out of the British High Commission. But I think importantly for those joining this evening, I commanded an army training regiment at Pirbright for 2.5 years, in which we trained all recruits going into the British Army across all cap badges and corps and regiments, and that was a really important role because it provides the foundation of our soldiers to the British Army and a unique experience. And I can certainly take questions on that 14-week initial course that all soldiers go through, both men and women joining the Army, because obviously I've had quite a lot of experience in training those, and I can maybe provide some insight into some of the myths and misinformation that is out there about that. But thank you, Faryal. I hope that is the
That's
introduction.
fantastic. Loads of questions are popping in my head, but I'd like to bring in Major Naveed Mohammed as well. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Faryal, I'm very well. A very good evening to you, Faryal, Colonel Guy, honoured guests. First of all, a huge thank you to the British Pakistan Foundation for inviting me tonight to share my experiences of being a person of Pakistani heritage and serving in the British Army. Really looking forward to the session. It's only an hour long, and previous experience tells me that before soon we'll be running out of time, so I'll not rattle on too much. But just a little bit about me. I'm not British born. I was born in Kenya. Both my paternal and maternal grandparents moved to Kenya from pre-1947 undivided India, and they worked in the railway industry. But the heritage is from Punjab, and I moved to the UK as a 13-year-old back in the early 80s. The year after, whilst I was in school, I joined the Army Cadet Force. Really enjoyed that. And when I was 18, I left the Army Cadet Force and I joined the Army Reserve as it's known today. And I served in the Army Reserve up until 2008. From then on, I've started more of a full-time. I'm a full-time reservist now. During my time, I've deployed in operations to the Balkans, to Iraq, and although it wasn't a full deployment as such to Afghanistan, it was more of a specialist visit to work on a strategy. I work as project officer to the Islamic advisor to the Chief of Defence Staff, and with him we undertake quite a bit of defence engagement. So I've had the privilege, as Colonel Guy mentioned, of having travelled extensively. You know, I've had some wonderful experiences in the Army, all the way from, and this sometimes comes as a surprise, you know, my operational experiences really do stand out. My expedition to Nepal back in when I was a very young man, back in 1997, is something that really sticks in my mind, including the delay in the flight changeover in Karachi. Gave us a day of sightseeing in Karachi, so that was quite good fun. But you know, internally in the Army, I've been working. My background is in the Royal Corps of Signals, so communications is the name of the game, as it were. But I've worked in Army recruiting. I've worked as a careers officer. And now employed as the Army's liaison officer in terms of reaching out and building better links with British Muslim communities, and hence tonight's activity for me is really important. So thank you. I'll stop there, and I'm sure
no, not at all, not at all. And the only thing is that we have to bring the MBE in. You were avoided the MBE, so I cannot go forward without mentioning that. Congratulations. Tell us a little about that, if you can.
Well, it seems an age ago. It was back in 2016. I still remember the phone call I got from my commanding officer at the time. It was just a couple of days before my birthday, as it happened, actually, just after Christmas Day. And I remember I was painting the kitchen, and my commanding officer rang me and told me. And I remember when I put the phone down, I carried on painting the same bit of wall for about, I don't know, a couple of minutes whilst this sunk in. And I remember she had told me that, you know, ideally I should keep it quiet until the formal list is released round about sometime on New Year's Eve. But once I got my senses back, I called my dad and told him.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Listen, that's absolutely, thank you both for coming and giving us your time. The only thing is I'll jump straight into it. Considering how things are with the British Army, why are we so keen, and either one of you can take up this question, is that we want to employ the BME thing. Why are we so keen to have them a part of the British Army? Why is the British Army so keen on this? Either one of you can take this question, and we can start from there.
I'm happy to, Colonel, if you're happy for me to lead off on that.
Yes, please, Major Naveed.
Okay, so I think the basic fact is that the Army needs to recruit, and we need to be able to recruit from the greatest pool there is available in order to ensure that we attract the best talent. The Army currently is not representative of British society, and we very much want to make sure that that is changed going forward. And it's not simply a tick box exercise. I can assure everyone listening in of that. It's about making sure that we can reach out to capable men and women who will be able to bring to us skills that they already have, or people who have the potential to develop into good soldiers, good leaders, good managers, good effective members of the British Army, in order that as an organization they can contribute to the safety and security of the United Kingdom.
And of course we want the British Army to be, like you said, representing what is English culture right now, which is a mix, an array of different communities. Why is it, do you think, that the communities do not want to be recruited in the British Army? What do you think is the reason? Is the recruitment policy a bit wrong? Do we feel that maybe with the BME community we need to engage a little differently? It's not possibly like just having an ad on TV. Maybe we need to go into the communities and tell them, people like yourself and Colonel Guy, who have worked with communities like that and have actually been in country with communities like that. Do you think we need to change the whole approach to how we try and focus ourselves on these communities?
I think, you know, certainly my personal experience is that we've become a lot better at how we show ourselves to society, and the numbers of people who identify as BAME has actually increased over the recent past, but nowhere near where it needs to be. And therefore, yes, we do need to think differently. You know, we do need to be more forward-leaning in terms of having candid conversations. We need to be able to have honest conversations. We need to listen to me. Being here tonight is not simply about me as a member of the British Army speaking and speaking to the audience. It's about mutual understanding. It's about making sure that the audience can understand what the British Army is all about, what our culture is, what our values are, what our role is. And it's also important for me to be able to take away from events such as this a better understanding of communities. What are the concerns? What are the questions? And I can feed that back into the system in order that we then adapt our messaging.
Colonel Guy, what do you think? You worked in various places. You worked in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan. What do you think should be our approach when do you think would feed the BME community to actually come and join the British Army?
Well, it's a really interesting question, because I think it's wider than just the BAME community. It's across all communities within the UK. And the biggest challenge we've got for the armed forces is the fact that across the UK, people don't understand what the army does, because we're not in the public eye in a very prominent way in the UK. We tend to only be seen in times of crisis or in times of traditional ceremonial roles like the Queen's birthday parade or the state opening of Parliament, but we don't have that image or understanding more widely in the community. And that's a challenge just for all communities, not just the BAME. And trying to understand what we're about is a real challenge for the army. And what we tend to see is people have become more understanding through some of the media sessions, like the Ross Kemp videos in Iraq, following troops there. See, yes, one side, but there are many sides to the army that it provides. And I think, you know, that's a challenge the army's faced for the last 20 years. And when I joined the army, we had the problem of Northern Ireland, and we were not allowed to wear uniform in public because we were a target, and therefore nobody ever saw the army. So when I've been in Pakistan, I see the army everywhere. They're on front page of the newspapers. They're in virtually every town that you go to. and people are fully aware of what they are providing to society. But in the UK, I think it's a different challenge.
Of course it is. The only thing is that we'll move away from this a tiny bit. Of course, it's not just recruiting men into the British Army, it's also engaging all sexes, women and men, and people of every denomination and everything. Well, like you said, I think the perception is flawed, and I think politics does play a strong role in it. I don't want to bring the whole political issue, but I think the British Army is tainted a tiny bit because, we'll see people go into areas of conflict and where the British Army is sent. Not everything in the British Army requires a face-to-face combat, which as a parent, I would be scared to send my child to the army to have a confrontational war-on situation. So, I think maybe is that just a perception? Because that's not just what the army does. In many facets of the army where children can go and actually work in different areas. Is that correct?
No, absolutely. And in terms of numbers, Faryal, so approximately 30% of the army is what we call the pointy end, the sharp end, the bit that does your combat arms, if you like, and 70% is your logistics, your communications, intelligence, medical, engineering, and the list goes on. And when we look at the what is the role of the army? Well, it's protect the UK, prevent conflict, deal with this disaster, and fight the nation's enemies. And that in itself tells you that the requirement is quite broad. Mm. So we need to be able to one day turn troops from involved in warfighting operations to delivering the vaccine program against COVID-19 on our streets, to going and assisting a disaster hit island in the Caribbean following a hurricane, or indeed as happened back in I believe it was 2005, that devastating earthquake in Pakistan, where assets were diverted from Afghanistan to go and make sure that aid could be given to a friendly country, a country with whom we have very strong relationships. So absolutely, I think it's quite right to be mindful of what the role of the army is, but it's important to bear in mind that you've got the combat element, and you've also got quite a large component which people may be able to relate to if they're not interested in the combat sort of trades.
So the question actually arises from there that not everyone, can you opt out of combat? Can you have that choice where if we're going into, for example, if I'm Pakistani, I don't want to go into anything against Pakistan, regardless of political aspirations or not. And do I have that choice as a recruit? Do I have a choice once I join the army, as in where I want to lead my career as an army officer?
So when you apply to join the British Army, you can select up to 3 jobs. And depending on your assessment, depending on your education qualifications, and depending on your sort of on computer generated tests, you will be given a list of jobs that the army feels, or the system feels, you may be trainable for. And out of that list, then you pick 3 in order of, well, I'd like to be an infantry first, then I'd like to be an engineer, or I'd like to be a logistician, whatever the case might be. And where possible, your first job is the one that will work for you to be put into. Whereas where there might be sort of a lack of vacancies or whatever the case might be, then we may need to move down to your second job or your third job. But very much at the outset, you have a choice as to what role you may wish to take on in the British Army. However, bearing in mind that everyone, regardless of who they are, will undergo training which turns them into a soldier first. Yeah. So you're always a soldier first, and then you have your trade second. And as an engineer or as a logistician, you may face a situation where you have to defend yourself and your colleagues, or you may have to defend the civilian population where you're operating, and you need to have those skills. But it's all your primary role is that what you're trained to deliver.
So the most common question that I would ask is that basically, what's the minimum age where you do join the army? Is that 18?
So it depends on what you want to join. When I say it depends on what you want to join, you can join as a soldier, or you can join as an officer. Now, if you want to join as a soldier, there are two routes. You can join as a junior soldier, what we call them junior entry is the terminology, or you can join as an adult soldier. Should you wish to join as a junior soldier, you can make an application, and I must make this very clear. This is only with the permission of your guardian, your carer, or your parent.
Of course.
You must have consent before, if you make an application before the age of 18. You can make an application at 15 years and 7 months.
Wow.
That's the beginning of the process. That's the beginning of the process, and that is you applying for a place at the Army Foundation College in Harrogate. And you will go and spend up to a year there, where you'll be working on your educational skills, your military skills. And once you've done 42 weeks of training there, you then go and do your specialist to arm training. And so that's one aspect. The other aspect, if you want to join as a what we would term an adult soldier, 17 and a half years old onwards, you can apply to join the army. And if you want to join as an officer and go and train at the world-renowned Royal Military Academy standards, where hopefully Colonel Gao will be able to share some of his experiences, having been there. 18 years old is at the start of training. So you can, depending on what route you want to take, the age limit, starting age is quite flexible.
And Colonel Jones, so I think the perception is well that Colonel Guy, is that when you join the army, it's there for life. If somebody joins the army and decides this is not for me, is there a way out of it, or do you need to pay back whatever you've spent over the years? Because obviously the government spends a lot of money on you once you join the army.
Yeah, there's normally a minimum time frame, and that can vary depending on the type of entry you come into the army. But depending on whether you're a soldier or an officer, there are slightly different time frames of which you can opt to leave at. For an officer, it tends to be at minimum of having completed 3 years training from Santas. As a soldier, it's fairly similar, but there are windows that you can opt to leave. So you can even opt to leave in your training period. There's a window of opportunity where they have a 2-week window where if the training is not for them, they can decide to leave. But once they are a trained soldier, then they are committed for I think it's again up to 3 years, and thereafter then they can resign whenever they wish to.
So let's just say that if somebody does their masters, is there an age limit where you can join the army, or you want them young so that you can sort of train them and stuff, or is there a cap at the top level of age limits?
So certainly joining the regular army. So you've got two options. By the way, I omitted mentioning quite an important another important option, which is to join the Army Reserve, and there are certain sort of age limits that apply there as well. But in terms of upper age limits, you can serve depending on what your speciality is. For example, if the army is short of surgeons, for example, and the upper age for joining as an officer is 29, then a conversation can be had on a one-on-one basis to look at your skills and see where that shortage exists in the army, and then have a discussion about bringing you in. So we've become a lot more clever about making sure that we're able to accommodate people with specialist skills, but that is very much on a one-on-one basis.
And is that a uniformed officer, or will that be like as a civilian recruit?
As a uniformed officer, so you're joining the army as in a quite a specialist. I'm talking about maybe a doctor or a dentist or a veterinarian, something like that.
Hmm. And if somebody does decide to leave the army, can they ever rejoin?
It depends on what reason you left the army, under what was the reason for you to leave the army. If you say, as Colonel Guy mentioned, you do your minimum service of 4 years, and you decide, you know what, at this point in my life, I'm quite happy to have done the 4 years, and you go away and you have a civilian career for another 2, 3, 4 years, as long as you're within that age range, then absolutely there should be any reason why you can't join. Had you been kicked out of the army, if you like, for disciplinary reasons, then clearly that brings about a different conversation.
And then people, like, obviously, or youths get into all sorts of trouble. If somebody does have a criminal conviction, is there sort of, can they still apply to the army with a conviction? Is there any way that the army will take somebody with that they do have a criminal conviction at all?
So we have quite detailed policy in terms of the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. And again, there's no answer that I can give now which would
Of course.
Apply to everyone, but there is a conversation to be had depending on what the offence was, how long ago it was you were charged, etc., and each case can be looked at to see whether you can or cannot join.
So obviously the whole idea about joining the forces is the idea of travel. Both Colonel Guy and Major Naveed, you all talk about your excessive travels, and you have traveled a lot. Is that something that every officer or soldier gets the opportunity to do? Is it just a certain amount of soldiers and certain amount of officers get this chance to be posted to different areas at all?
Sorry, was that for me or
Colonel Guy, about travel?
Yeah, I think it's for anybody who joins the army, dependent on where within the army they go to, the opportunities to travel are extensive, be it by volunteering, be it by sport, be it by operations. There are very extensive opportunities, and both Major Naveed's and my careers indicate just how broad a spectrum of countries that you can join. And that was one of the main reasons that I joined, was to travel extensively. But those opportunities are very much out there. What is less restricted now is being posted overseas, because the number of bases that we have overseas has reduced greatly over the last 20 years, and people will probably be aware that one of our largest locations for people being based at was in Germany, and over the last 6 years we've been reducing that footprint down hugely. But that doesn't mean that from a training point of view that there isn't a wide opportunity to travel extensively. And similarly, one of the important aspects of the army to develop more extreme, shall we say, situations and being able to deal with them has always been found from adventure training. And whether that's climbing mountains or canoeing rivers or going to extreme parts of the Antarctic or Arctic, again, those expeditions happen all the time throughout the year, and it's really down to the individual whether they want to be involved in something like that. Similarly, on a sporting front, there is, because one of the things the army promotes is competition and teamwork, and obviously through sports we're able to do that. And from my own experiences, I toured South Africa with the Welsh Guards in 2003 with our rugby team. On adventure training, I canoed and kayaked the entire length of the Zambezi in Zimbabwe. I've climbed Mount Kenya. There are oodles of opportunities. I played polo in Pakistan. I played polo in Argentina. Again, the
You're making me want to join the army quickly. So I'm ready to join.
Those are the good times.
I think I'm way over that age limit. I'm not specialist. Also, right now in the current climate, mental health is a massive, massive issue. And it doesn't matter which community you belong to. How does the army tackle soldiers that sort of have been, even if not frontline, have been in places? Obviously, mental health plays a huge issue. Do you have areas where this is being dealt with by professionals.
Absolutely. Mental health is something quite serious, and certainly over the last 12 months has shown that you don't need to be somebody who's served in the military to be able to be diagnosed from suffering from mental health. And all of us have an opportunity to look out for each other, and where we can, reach out to the individual or see what you can do to support them. Certainly from an Army perspective, we have very professional medical organization, both internal, which can support us, and we have access into third-party organizations as well, who can provide support to personnel. But I think if I may just touch on what Colonel Guy mentioned just now.
Please.
That whole idea of the opportunity and the multiple opportunities that you're given as a person, I think that really strengthens your mind. Whether as Colonel Guy mentioned, canoeing in the Zambezi. Well, I've got a huge phobia of crocodiles, for example, and I suspect that more than on one occasion, one or two crocodiles may have been sighted quite close to his canoe, and therefore it's about how can you safely be brought to a place where your fears may be telling you one thing, but your training and your skills and the camaraderie around you support you through that process. And I think it's enough me sitting here saying this, and perhaps if I may just give Salman a bit of a heads up here, there's a short sort of 2-minute video clip featuring a young soldier of Pakistan heritage who is a member of the Army Air Corps. He's a communication specialist by trade. He's currently training. Hopefully in the near future he'll get himself a place on a physical training instructor's course. He cycles for the Army Air Corps. He does orienteering for the Army Air Corps and for the Army as well, I believe. So it's one career but multiple opportunities. So perhaps if we've got time, we can have a quick 2-minute view of that video. Salman, if possible.
So thank you, Salman. If you could play the Muneeb Sheikh video, please. Thank you so much.
My mum was quite skeptical, like every mother, but eventually when I did pass out as a trained soldier and came to the field army, she was really proud. Even she says it's the best thing I've done with my life so far. My name is Muneeb Sheikh. I'm 24, serving in the British Army Air Corps 4 Regiment based in Suffolk, Ipswich. As a Muslim and serving in the British Army, I think my faith, it goes hand in hand. A typical day in my actual job would be waking up at 0700. I'll get up, have a shower, brush my teeth, get ready. Training PTI, training to become an all-arms physical training instructor. Mountain climbers for the exercises. First thing on a Monday morning is the regimental PT session. I love pushing myself and I love pushing other people. Like when I just go do these training sessions with the lads and with the girls from the regiment, it just gives me a buzz and it makes me happy that people are doing well and I'm playing a big part in their upbringing of their physical training. I'm an aviation communication specialist and my main job role is to communicate with the Apache attack helicopters. It's quite exciting. The main link between the ground to the command all the way to the pilots. You're about to finish work, you finish off the jobs, make sure all the paperwork's done for the day, hangars closed up. After that, you're in your own time. Probably the best thing about the British Army or the forces in general is the camaraderie. It's my mates, my brothers and my sisters. It's a very tight-knit family. The bond you create is unbreakable. I've got support where I need, prayer room, halal food, halal ration packs, time off work when it's the fasting season. If you really want to be part of the British Army, no matter where you come from, there's always a place for you, like there is for me, there is for everyone. So just make that first step and you won't regret
it. Thank you, Salman. And if people want to watch that or other videos on the Armed Forces Muslim Association YouTube channel, please do go and visit. I've got a website as well. Have a look, and some of the questions that perhaps come up, and Faryal, a lot of the questions that you've asked already, at least many of those are answered on those
Absolutely.
channels.
We will put the links up in any case, and anyone who wants to know, we can send you the links. If you want to email us, we'll send you all the links that you need to know. Simplest questions, the most hard-hitting questions are answered there. It's good to see, but with what I saw with the Munish Sheikh's video is that it's not just one dimensional where you think you're only going to go, you're only going to be in combat, and that's all you're going to do. Actually, it actually gives you different aspects of where you can go if that's your forte or if that's where you want to go. So it's not just one. So army is not one dimensional that people actually think. It's not all about war and not all about politics.
Indeed, and we mentioned earlier on about the multiple opportunities, but something else to bear in mind is that a career in the army is potentially preparing you and developing you for your next careers. So you could do 4 years in the army, you could do 10 years, you could do what Colonel Guy did, 26 odd years, and you still got enough time left. And the skills that some of the skills that you develop, no civilian company will equip you with those skills. Certainly not without charging or asking you to pay a lot of money. So building up those skills, building up the qualifications is almost preparing you for your future.
So obviously with the BME community, keeping that in mind, the qualifications aspects always like as a parent, for me, being a Pakistani mum, appeals to me the most, because it's all about education. So what qualifications, because if you go in at the age of, let's say, 17, 18, that means you've just passed your A-levels. So what level, is it graduation, is it master's? How does it work for somebody who has no idea about the education in the army?
So what I would say is, from a soldier perspective, the army is one of the biggest providers of apprenticeships in the UK, and you can find a whole host of apprenticeships that may and the different levels of apprenticeships as well, that you could complete within quite a short period of time, and it's all paid for. If you join as an officer, you're working towards a degree from the moment you start your training. We also offer bursaries for people who are, say, if you want to become a doctor, you could apply for an army bursary, and the army will sponsor you through med school and will give you a work placement at the end of that. So all in all, that package is worth, if I remember correctly, about £75,000.
Wow, which is paid for by the army.
Paid for by the army, and then therefore you don't have that debt to pay back after your 5 years in medical school. Clearly, those bursaries are limited to particular jobs. Again, I mentioned doctors, dentists, veterinary surgeons, nursing officers, for example. You can also apply to become a student nurse, where you as long as you meet the minimum standard, you can apply to become a student nurse. There is a bursary available, and at the end of your 3-year course, you then have a guaranteed job placement somewhere in the country. So the list is huge. The list is massive in terms of the sort of the qualifications that we know of in terms of traditional your A-levels and your degrees and what have you. The one thing that the army has become a lot better at, and I'll happily leave Colonel Guy to contribute to this as well, is that the army has become a lot better in making sure that the qualifications that you earn are recognized when you leave. Many years ago, you got loads of qualifications, but they were recognized within the army and nowhere else. And when soldiers were leaving outside, and they said they had every single driving license you could ever wish for, you could have this particular army permit to be able to drive fuel tankers. It was all great, but because it didn't translate into a civilian qualification, it was effectively not worth a lot. So we've learned our lessons over the years, and now when you leave with those qualifications, these are qualifications which are recognized in civilian industry. Colonel, over to you. Anything on that?
Yeah, I would just add to it as well that a lot more is now being done by industry to encourage employment of veterans leaving the army. And I should just point out that a veteran is somebody who may have only done 1 day in the army and has sworn his oath and then has been medically discharged. That person is still a veteran, as well as the people who've served any number of years subsequently. But I left 6 years ago now, and interestingly, there are huge now, much more scope and variety in terms of interest from firms out there who want to exploit the fact that military personnel leaving come with leadership skills, they come with confidence, reliability, and these sort of elements that, as well as, you know, your certificates of qualifications that Major Naveed was talking about, but there are uncertified qualifications that you have that you can bring to the workplace that people are now recognizing more widely.
There are loads of questions here, which I thought I might just bring some of our viewers in. We have a question by Anwar Zaidi, who says, what has been the experience of a BME who have joined the army? Is there any data, and how many have left for one reason or the other? Whichever one of you want to take on this question, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. You know, so in terms of discharges, I certainly don't have access to that granularity of data from that perspective. But when soldiers either choose to leave or are discharged, there's a process that happens to get a better understanding of why they're leaving, and in some cases it may be that process involves a conversation to understand what can be done to retain that soldier. I mean, it could be someone who has done, you know, 4 to 10 years and has quite a specialized skill, which that we don't really want to lose because of the money and the investment that is taken for he or she to obtain. And therefore there is that process to understand why an individual is choosing to leave. And if it is something which is within the gift of the organization that we can do about to rectify, then of course we'll do. But a lot of people will choose to leave because they feel that the skills that they've picked up are enough for them to start a second career somewhere.
Also, one of the questions and suggestions here, I don't want to read the question because it's sort of generic, it's just about the bullying and the racist element of things, which we can't really skirt about. The institutional racism that people will bring up, which there are in a couple of questions here, I'd rather not ask the question or put it forward to you. People from the communities, of different communities, BME communities, do feel that there is a certain sort of a racial sort of undertone in the British Army. Either one of you can take on asking that question, as where do you think you are, where they're calling it institutional racism?
I think I'll start off with quite a blunt response in terms of any form of racist behavior is not tolerated in the British Army today. You know, I go back to when I was a young soldier. The culture and what was allowed was different then. We've come along a long journey, and I've been part of some, as I mentioned at the beginning, I've been part of some of the initiatives which have been geared up towards making the lived experience of everyone, regardless of who they are, and making their lived experience a positive one. Where an allegation is made of someone having suffered racist behavior and the investigation takes place and a perpetrator is identified and charged, well, there's a whole list of sanctions that can be placed amongst that individual, upon that individual, including dismissal. You know, it's fairly. It sounds like an easy answer, but it's not. You know, there is a very direct blanket policy of not tolerating any racist behavior or any discrimination of any description. And I think maybe I'll hand over to Colonel Guy here, because he was commanding officer of the Army Training Regiment in Pirbright, where we train our young soldiers.
Absolutely.
And the values which are instilled in soldiers from day one, and how those values make sure we shape people's minds, regardless of whatever they bring into the organization before they join the army. And that in itself is a bit of a journey. But I think thoughts from Colonel Guy would be quite useful at this stage.
Yeah, thank you, Major Naveed. It's not about colour or the whole training regime is built around trust and teamwork. And that is underpinned by the Army's values and standards, which are very straightforward. They haven't changed. And I think anybody in society would recognize them. And the three standards that are there, and all the training is conducted around these standards and values to make sure that people understand the situations that they're being put in, to be able to relate them to those values and standards. And I'll just explain them now. The standards are that soldiers' behaviour must be, 1, appropriate, 2, completely professional, and stay within the law. And those are the three standards that the Army instills in their soldiers. The values, again, haven't changed. And again, I think people who work in civilian organisations will recognise that some of these are in those organisations, and that is courage, discipline, respect for others, integrity, loyalty, selfless commitment, and those are the values that everything. So when I was commanding at Pirbright, and every 7 weeks we would have the parents come in to Pirbright to see. It was the first time that they were being allowed to go home, and the parents could see the difference from week 1 to week 7. That what I tried to explain to them that we were teaching them was that everybody had to depend on somebody else, because if you are in an operation in an environment and you are injured in whatever way, it's going to be the person next to you, who could be anybody, who is going to treat you. And that instills an awful lot of trust in everybody. And it doesn't matter where your background, who you come from, you all have to rely on that, and that knowledge and the trust that's built up is really important. And that is unique to everybody, and it doesn't matter where you come from. And I think that's really important that people understand that that is what you are going to engage in if you join the Army, is to be able to adhere to those values and standards.
So the same standards and values that a family should have. The next question that we have is from an anonymous attendee is, why is it that PTSD is increasing in the military? Is it because support is lacking?
If I can jump in there, I would say that we're becoming better at recognizing signs of PTSD and encouraging people to come forward. You know, there was and still sadly is a culture, especially amongst men who are serving, that if they're undergoing a tough time, it's all about stiff upper lip, keep my head down. I don't want to show weakness in front of my friends and family and what have you, and keeping it all in, keeping it bottled in. And we've had, certainly over the recent past, you know, a number of initiatives which are encouraging people to talk about their feelings and seeking opportunities at which they can talk about anything that might be bothering them, you know. So I would say that rather than the levels increasing, I think we are becoming, and that within that I do say that, you know, we've had to work to get to this stage. We're becoming an organization that is much more able to encourage people to seek help where it's needed.
There's another question saying, excuse me, is it true that military life is not for married people? And is divorce rate higher than it is in civilian life? Which is a brilliant question. I love this question.
Well,
either one of you can have this question.
I think maybe I'll let Colonel Guy start with that one.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very interesting question. Having said that, there is a very important factor on family in the military, and one thing that the Army does provide, in a way, you could argue that it encourages family and marriages. They provide low-cost housing for married couples. and it compared to where you might be posted, and you might be, so for example, down the road from where I live, Windsor is a very expensive area, but the soldiers there are living in they would be paying the same price for their married quarter as you would do anywhere else in the country. So there is great support for families. There is no doubt, though, that tours away from home, which are normally about six months, can be very hard on particularly young families who have young married mothers or husbands who have young children at home, and the other half is away and abroad on 6 month tours, and it is hard. There are welfare support groups that are left behind to help those families during those times, and on the whole, they are well supported. Are there high rates of divorce as a consequence of long careers in the military? Yes, as in all facets of society, there is divorces that do take place. The pressures do take their toll on people. But at the same time, there's a large percentage that have very happy family lives. And there is, and I saw this from my time commanding the training regiment, a lot of people coming through the training were from broken homes, and they were desperate for some form of family, and the army provided that. They provided routine, they provided every form of welfare that they could provide, and that continues through their life in the armed forces. So you could see that the army was there in a much wider role than just training them for combat missions. And I suppose one of the downsides, you complete a full career and then suddenly all that support is sort of taken away from you when you leave, and it can be much harder going through a full married life in the armed forces, and then coming out the other side, and you don't have your own house or whatever at the end of it. But yes, I'm not going to deny the fact that there are pressures on family life in the army, and that's more through spending a lot of time away from home. It can be. We're not in that high operational cycle that we were for 15 years from 2001 when we were involved in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so there are less pressures at the moment, but that might change. We never know what's going to come around the corner, and that's the difficulty with being in the armed forces. You never know where the next threat is going to come from and where your next commitments are going to be. I'm not sure that that's fully answered, but I mean, no,
that's a really good answer. I think it's quite a broad answer. I think nobody can tell, because obviously, as much as we try and detach British Army from politics, unfortunately, politics is involved where British Army is concerned. I don't expect either one of you to comment on that, but we have another question which we have answered before when we started the thing, but I think one of our attendees wasn't there. That do all personnel need to go into active combat is the next question.
So depending on what the scenario is, there'll be a requirement for a particular group of people to deploy, and that group of people could be everything from your infanteers to logisticians to engineers, etc. So if you're joining the British Army, there's no way I could sit here today and say to you, you'll never be deployed, but when you deploy, you will primarily be focused on doing the job that you trained to do.
I think a lot of people want to ask this question. I might as well be the one to ask the question. Let's just say if the deployment is against anybody from the BME community, that is against their people that they sort of come from, like for example against Pakistan, and for me being a Pakistani, maybe I don't want to be deployed to Pakistan. In that scenarios, can I actually excuse myself from that service, or as an army soldier, I have to go where the army sends me, is what I feel the question might be.
I think we're probably entering another 4 or 5 hour discussion
Hours of
here.
fine, right. No, absolutely. No, I completely understand. So moving.
No,
Yes.
absolutely. I think you know, that's a conversation an individual would and should have with themselves before they decide to join the army. You know, there's no secret that the army is currently, you know, as I mentioned earlier on, our primary role to protect the UK, and we look around us and we look at the threats that we're facing, whether it be cyber attack from individuals or hostile nations. We have troops currently based in Estonia because of events going on in that part of the world. That's very much, I think it's a question for someone to address in their minds before they join. And the reason why I said this, we're entering into a 4 or 5 hour conversation. I think the conversation is all about identity, about where whom is. You know, we are now probably second, third, fourth, maybe even, I don't know, are we in 5th generation people who since our sort of elders moved here post Second World War? Where is home? And I went to Pakistan for the first time in 1976 as a very young chap. And then my most recent visit there was, I think, in 2014. I was spotted as an outsider miles away.
Absolutely.
Straight away that I, you know, so where does that sort of conversation happen in someone's mind? So it's all about, I think identity and where you belong has something to do with it, but certainly it's a conversation to have before you join the army.
And this falls very well into the next question, is that what British values mean to those people who are born in Pakistan and have a bicultural identity and not third, fourth generation compared to other British Pakistanis? How do we coax people who are just young kids, like maybe at the age of 12, that have come in from Pakistan now to settle into the UK, to actually encourage them to join the British Army?
I would say go back and have a look at that visit with Trooper Sheikh. Look at it. He was exactly that. You know, he came to the country from Pakistan as a very young lad. I would refer to my own nephew who joined the army at 16 years old. He could have done, and he's born and bred in Rochdale. You know, he's sort of 3rd generation UK, and he. You know, he could have joined and picked a trade, as he were. You know, he could be a member of the Royal Signals or logistician or engineer, but he chose to become an inventeer because that's what he wanted. You know, and I think we should be very careful in saying that because you are someone of Pakistani heritage or someone of another heritage, that you will not want to participate in or join the army in a combat role, because I think we're then doing a disservice to those young people, because they will want to do what they feel is appropriate for them.
This is a question for Colonel Guy by Anwar Zaidi, saying that having been in the army and now in the private sector, would you have suggested your children to join the army, Colonel Guy?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, but I think that's more about, shall we say, parenting than anything else, because you know, how you direct your children into whatever sphere of employment that they go into. I've never put any pressure on them to join the army. If they wanted to, I would have fully supported them. Having said that, none of them have so far, well, 3 out of 4 of them that have left home have shown no sign of wanting to go into the army. Having said that, my daughter, who's studying to be an occupational therapist, is doing a study on occupational therapy in the army, as being an area that they haven't really sort of concentrated on as such. But in terms of answering, I mean, as a parent, if that was what they really wanted to do, obviously I would fully support them, but I haven't encouraged them. And so far they've shown no interest in joining, I'm afraid. So, you know, that's my answer, I'm afraid.
Thank you so much, Colonel Guy and Major Naveed. I would say, if there are any closing arguments that you'd like to put forward before I sign off. Colonel Guy, let's start with you, please.
Yeah, no, as I say, as an institution, hopefully we've been able to highlight some of the sort of myths that are out there about the army. I think the biggest challenge for people out there, it is a huge organization which offers so many different specializations, and that for somebody thinking of joining, it's very daunting to try and understand where you might fit into that organization. But it is, as I've tried to explain, it's very broad in terms of it just wants people to be a soldier in the army. It doesn't really care where you come from. As long as you can meet the standards and requirements that are set, that is the most important fact. And I think in sort of indicative, I hope, of what I said, that I only joined to do 3 years to play sport and visit countries, and I ended up doing 26 years, which is far longer than I ever intended. And I would say that I enjoyed every single minute that I was in there.
Major Naveed, some last words from you, please.
Well, clearly I'm going to be biased. You know, if you are a young man or woman and you're looking for an interesting, a challenging, a rewarding career, then I'm not a recruiter, so I'm not going to say go and join the British Army. But what I would encourage you to do is have a look. We have the World Wide Web at your fingertips, which is a treasure trove of information. You know, have a look at some of the links which will be sent out to you at the end of the call today. Learn about what the Army is all about. Learn a bit more about what our role is. If need be, reach out to your nearest military establishment, which can be done on the Army Jobs website. Put your postcode in, and it'll tell you where your nearest Army establishment is. Reach out to them, just drop an email to them and say, look, you know, I'd like to learn a bit more about what you do. Nobody's going to say to you as soon as you're walking through the gate, that's it, you're done and dusted. That might have happened, you know, many years ago, but certainly not anymore. It's all about making an informed choice, and clearly that applies to anything. You know, doesn't just apply to the Army. It applies to anyone in civilianry, making an informed choice about what it is that you wish to do. It's an organization that offers something which no other organization can offer you, you know, in terms of the camaraderie. I am currently speaking with people I call close friends who only met 3, 4, 5 years ago, and these are people who, you know, I've built very, very close relationship to. Many of them are white English, for example, you know, so and it's all about you being the same alongside your comrades.
Thank you both so much for taking time out and talking to us, and I hope this encourages you. And if you have any further questions, you can always get in touch with BPF and get into contact with them. And if you need any help and any details about the conversation today, it will be recorded and you possibly can get a recording. Colonel Naveed, thank you so much. Major Naveed.
Thank you for the promotion.
I knew I would make a mistake somewhere. Major Naveed, thank you so much. Colonel Guy, thank you so much. Thank you, BPF, and thank you all for being patient. And if there are any more questions, please send them to us. Good night, good evening. I'm Faryal Khan. I'll speak to you guys later.